For most women, their wedding day is supposed to be the most beautiful moment of their lives. A symbol of love, of commitment, of a future shared hand in hand. But for her, it became the cruelest humiliation. Beneath the glittering chandeliers, surrounded by flowers and the gaze of hundreds of guests, she stood alone in a pristine white dress. The music played, the guests whispered, the cameras flashed, yet the groom was nowhere to be seen. Behind the curtains, he had already run away, not because of an accident or an emergency, but because his heart belonged to another. His Bai Yue Guang, the unattainable first love, was lying in a hospital bed, pretending to be sick, waiting for his attention. And he chose her, leaving his bride to stand in the middle of the aisle, abandoned on the very day that should have been her happiest. That moment was not the end of the story, was only the beginning. What followed was a marriage built on betrayal, a love poisoned by obsession, and a woman forced to decide whether she would keep suffering in silence or finally break free and claim her life back. She had always believed that marriage would bring security. When she agreed to marry him, she knew his heart carried another name. But she convinced herself that time, patience, and devotion could make her indispensable. She became the official wife, the one recognized by both families, and in her naive hope, she thought that wearing the title of Mrs. would one day lead to genuine love. From the very start, however, the cracks were visible. The wedding preparations were rushed, almost careless. The engagement ring had been ordered in the wrong size, as though chosen for someone else. The wedding photo shoot never took place. He claimed he was too busy, though she later learned that he had been visiting the other woman. Even the wedding dress had been picked hastily, without a single fitting session, leaving her feeling like a mannequin rather than a bride. Her friends warned her. Her mother cried and begged her to reconsider, but she was stubborn. She told herself that sacrifices were normal, that once she entered his home as his wife, everything would fall into place. After all, she had the marriage certificate, the family's acknowledgement, and the official title. Wasn't that enough? On the wedding day, her hands trembled as she walked down the aisle, but she held her head high. The music swelled, the guests rose from their seats, and all eyes turned to her. Yet, the one person she sought in the crowd was missing. His absence was deafening, more humiliating than any whispered gossip. Every step she took felt like a march into ridicule. People exchanged glances, some sympathetic, others mocking. A bride without a groom, what could be more pitiful? When she reached the altar, she stood there alone. The priest cleared his throat. The guests murmured louder, and still no groom appeared. She smiled faintly, trying to mask the storm inside her chest. Her lips trembled as she told herself, he must be delayed. He must have a reason. But deep down, a voice whispered the truth. He had chosen someone else. That night, while she sat in her bridal gown in an empty hotel room, he was at the hospital holding the hand of his beloved, Bai Yue Guang. Her marriage began not with vows and promises, but with abandonment and betrayal. This was the beginning of her life in darkness, a life where she would play the role of a wife, but never the role of the woman he truly loved. The humiliation of her wedding day could have been forgiven if it had been a single mistake. She told herself again and again that she could endure, that once she was his wife, he would eventually see her worth. But marriage, instead of bringing closeness, only deepened the abyss between them. Her husband never tried to hide where his loyalty lay. Whenever his Bai Yue Guang so much as sneezed, he rushed to her side. He canceled dinners, skipped anniversaries, even ignored family obligations for the fragile figure who lived in his heart. Meanwhile, his wife became little more than a shadow in his house. Her in-laws were merciless. If it weren't for our son's sense of responsibility, do you think he would ever marry you? Every meal became a silent battlefield, every family gathering a performance in which she was forced to smile while swallowing her tears. No matter how much she contributed, whether it was managing the household, attending events, or keeping up appearances, was never enough. She was the legal wife, yet treated like an unwanted guest. The cruelty reached its peak when she discovered she was pregnant. For the first time in months, her heart fluttered with hope. Perhaps this child could change everything. Perhaps, with a family of their own, he would finally see her not as a burden, but as a partner. She shared the news with trembling hands, her eyes filled with expectation. His response shattered her completely. He did not rejoice, nor did he comfort her. Instead, he sighed and said, "Now is not a good time. She is still unwell. I can't let this stress her. Keep it quiet for now." That very evening, while she lay alone with morning sickness gnawing at her, he was hosting a lavish birthday party for his Bai Yue Guang. She watched from outside the restaurant, her figure reflected in the glass window. Inside, laughter and music flowed as he carefully cut a cake, the knife steady in his hand, his eyes tender as they met the woman beside him. Her hand instinctively cradled her belly, her breath fogging the window. To the world inside, she did not exist. She was invisible, erased, a ghost haunting her own marriage. From that moment, her pregnancy became a secret she carried alone. Doctor's appointments, sleepless nights, the quiet terror of every cramp she bore it all in silence. And as her body grew weaker, her heart grew colder. Each sacrifice was met with indifference, each plea ignored, until despair became her constant companion. The tragedy was no longer just the absence of love. It was the realization that she had lost not only her husband's affection, but also her dignity. She was a wife in name, but nothing more than a placeholder in reality. The breaking point came on a cold winter night. She had been feeling unwell for weeks, yet no one noticed. One evening, a sharp pain ripped through her body, leaving her doubled over on the floor. She clutched her stomach, her breaths shallow, her vision blurred. In the silence of their luxurious home, she realized she was utterly alone. Her husband's phone was switched off. He was attending yet another gathering with his Bai Yue Guang. The maids hesitated to call him, knowing his temper. So she dragged herself into a taxi, her hands trembling as she begged the driver to take her to the hospital. Hours later, under the blinding lights of the emergency room, the doctor delivered the words that shattered her. She had lost the baby. Tears stung her eyes, not only from grief, but from the cruel irony. She had hoped this child would anchor her marriage, yet it slipped away before it could even take its first breath. When she woke, her bed was empty, except for the cold sheets beside her. He hadn't come. Not a call, not a message. Instead, the one who arrived was an old friend, someone she hadn't seen in years. His face was lined with worry as he scolded gently. "Why are you enduring this alone? Why are you letting yourself be treated like this?" His words pierced her heart more than the doctor's. For the first time, she saw herself through another's eyes, not as a wife fighting bravely for her marriage, but as a woman slowly destroying herself for a love that never existed. Lying in that hospital bed, she realized she had been clinging to an illusion. Her husband's heart had never belonged to her, not even for a single day. She had mistaken the marriage certificate for security, when in truth, it was just a paper cage. That night, she made a decision. When she returned home, she quietly packed her belongings. She took off the wedding ring that had always felt too loose, as if it had been measured for someone else. She left it on the nightstand, a silent declaration that she was done playing the role of the invisible bride. With trembling hands but steady resolve, she signed the divorce papers and placed them on his desk. No tears, no confrontation, no final plea for affection. Only a note written in a calm hand. "I release myself from this marriage. May you find happiness with the woman you chose. I will no longer stand in the shadows." For the first time in years, she felt the weight lift from her chest. The pain of loss remained, but beneath it flickered something she had almost forgotten: hope. Not hope for his love, but hope for her own freedom. This was the turning point. The moment she stopped being the woman abandoned at the altar and became the woman who chose to walk away. When he first discovered the divorce papers, he laughed bitterly. He thought it was just a tantrum, another attempt to gain his attention. In his mind, she was too soft, too dependent, too afraid of being alone to truly leave. He shoved the documents aside and went back to his Bai Yue Guang, confident that she would crawl back eventually. But weeks passed, then months, and she never returned. Without her presence, the cracks in his world began to widen. The woman he worshipped, his so-called Bai Yue Guang, was not the gentle angel he had imagined. Freed from the shadow of a legal wife, she became demanding, manipulative, and reckless. She wanted wealth, status, and constant reassurance. She complained about the smallest inconveniences and mocked him when his career began to stumble. The empire he had once built with confidence began to crumble. Business partners withdrew, scandals surfaced, and his carefully polished reputation cracked beyond repair. Each time he reached out for support, the woman he sacrificed everything for slipped further away. Until finally, she left him, entirely taking with her the last illusions he had clung to. In the emptiness of his downfall, regret gnawed at him. He remembered the bride who once stood waiting at the altar, smiling despite her loneliness. He remembered the meals she prepared, the quiet ways she tried to please his parents, the nights she stayed awake, worrying about his health while he was away. Only now, when it was too late, did he realize who had truly loved him. By then, she had already built a new life. She rented a small studio in the city and transformed it into a flower shop. The fragrance of fresh roses and lilies filled her days, replacing the bitterness of the past with a newfound sense of peace. For the first time, she lived for herself, not for a husband, not for a family name, not to prove her worth. She smiled more often, laughed freely, and even began to dream again. Sometimes she saw couples walking hand in hand past her shop, and instead of pain, she felt serenity. Love was no longer a prison, it was a choice. And if it ever came to her again, she would enter it not as a desperate shadow, but as a woman who knew her own value. Her story no longer ended with a lonely bride at the altar. It ended with a woman reborn, radiant in her independence. One spring morning, as she arranged a bouquet of white lilies for a customer, she caught her reflection in the glass window. She was dressed simply, a plain white dress flowing around her frame, her hair pinned back with a pearl clip. And in that reflection, she saw not a bride abandoned, but a woman who had married herself to her own strength, her own freedom, her own future. This was her liberation, and it was beautiful. The story of the lonely bride is not just a tale of heartbreak, is a reminder that love without respect is nothing but a cage. Too many women are taught to endure, to sacrifice, to stay silent in the hope that one day their devotion will be noticed. But silence does not earn love, and sacrifice does not guarantee happiness. Her journey shows us that the most powerful moment in a woman's life is not when she marries the man she loves, but when she chooses to love herself more than the pain others inflict upon her. She walked away from humiliation, betrayal, and abandonment. Not because she stopped loving, but because she finally realized her love was worth far more than what she was given. And what happened when she left? The man who thought she would never escape learned the harshest lesson of all. Regret comes too late. And once a woman discovers her strength, she never returns to her chains. So to every listener watching this video, if you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever stood alone while others were celebrated, remember, you deserve more. You deserve to be the bride of your own life, not the shadow in someone else's story. If this story touched your heart, share it with a friend, a sister, or anyone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the truth hidden behind the glitter of Bai Yue Guang. And most importantly, never forget, you are enough. You are worthy, and you hold the pen to write your own ending.